I'd like to introduce the panel. It's going to be led by Chris Lewis of Lewis Insight. I'll let Chris come up.
Shall I do that one?
The panel is going to be on transport network automation for dynamic delivery of new 5G services. And if I can, Rudolf and Sasha, if you'd like to join too.
Thank you, Francis, and Aysenur, thank you very much for that. Have we got Sasha and we have Rudolf?
Yep.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So, as to repeat Aysenur's comment, thank you for sticking with us and for taking on board such a lot of information during the day. As an analyst, we're always trying to understand demand and supply, the different technology changes. And when Giles said to me, would I do the transport session at the end of day one, knowing how tired everybody would be, I thought, come on, this is such a different area, and it doesn't get enough coverage, it doesn't get enough explanation as to what's going on. And yet, as Enrique Blanco said in the interview that he did prior to the event, this is so important to what we're doing as an industry. And I think his quote was 60% growth in transport traffic on an annual basis. And he said, and his quote was, we need to do something bold to address this issue. So I thought we should have a bold panel to finish off the day. So please be bold. Aysenur, you've already been bold and you've already introduced yourself. Rudolf, perhaps you should reintroduce because you were in a previous panel, but we may have some different people in there. So.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Rudolf Strijkers. I'm enterprise architect and I'm leading the OSS transformation at Swisscom.
And Sasha from Nokia.
My name is Sasa Nijemcevic. I lead the network automation business unit at Nokia, so I'm a vendor here. So for us, that's basically a domain controller layer that provides the management control and automation platform for primarily IP networks or IP optical networks.
So Aysenur, if I might come to you first, you talked in your presentation about the transport element. You talked about the customer, the customer demands shaping what you're doing in the transport area. Can you tell us a bit more about that? How does that, what we as customers are doing, how does that flow through to you managing the transport network within Telefonica Deutschland?
Yeah. I think where we see the customer effect is the capacity and the latency measures, right? So what happens is that as the 5G element comes in and there's more demand for the bandwidth, so it comes as a capacity and a latency request. No? On capacity, we need to continue pumping in the capacities, and on latency topic, we need to simplify the network. We need to again change the logical network, look at the simplification of the network, right? So, and that also brings about, connecting it with automation. Transport network, of course, when we talk about logical design, it's a lot about routing domains. But when it comes to the processes and automation, it's how fast we react, right? How fast we react to customer demands in terms of latency and capacity.
And Rudolf, from your point of view, you say you're an enterprise architect, but this is Swisscom as an enterprise in the whole organization.
Yeah.
How do you, perhaps, given that we've already heard from Aysenur about where her journey is so far, where are you on this transport network automation journey?
Yeah, so with us, the OSS transformation came actually from bottom up. And this is very important to realize that we were busy looking at the new operation model for transport networks. And in this, we discovered that to reach things like DevOps, to increase resilience, to improve change management, you have to create domains. And then from these domains, we started to do the exercise across the whole OSS area and came up with these terms like NAS, and then we found the whole community doing this stuff. So that is where the challenge is, but transport is very important to us because that is where we're now doing the actual transformation. This is where we're introducing DevOps, this is where we're doing inventories, this is where we're building APIs, where we're standardizing configuration management. So it's like the first area, and also a very important area for us, where we start to do what we wanted to do.
And do you think, given many of the discussions that we've had today and in many industry forums such as this, do you think access just gets too much attention and we don't deal enough with the transport side?
Well, if the transport network doesn't work, we have a problem.
Exactly.
So that's
My point.
the first thing. And we also always expect it to work. That's also a thing. But no, in Swisscom, the transport network has a lot of attention. Of course, it's not as big as access. But that's also the beauty of it. It gives us an area that we can manage, that we understand very well, and where we can also apply these new concepts.
And Sasha, with your role within Nokia, you obviously see a lot of organizations, whether we can quantify how many telcos you deal with on a regular basis, but how would you sort of categorize and describe their journeys on the transport side at the moment?
Well, one thing, I mean, we're talking about literally hundreds and hundreds of customers that we deal with, and I would say every single one is definitely somewhere on the journey, or automation journey, right? So nobody is ignoring the need for automation, and nobody is saying, hey, we don't want to do anything. So it depends, it varies from geography to geography and from customer to customer, degree to which they've progressed on automation journey. But the desire is definitely there, the need is there for sure. And I think there is a realization that the technology and tooling is available. It's no longer a question of technologies that allow us to automate or tooling around it. It's more about picking the right projects, picking the right priorities, and investing in it and executing.
And Chris, can I have a comment about the radio being more? So we say radio is the king, no? But we are the queens. So in transport, I think when a new launch comes, of course, radio is I mean, we talk a lot about coverage, we talk about frequencies, because in the morning we discuss half of the investments goes to the frequency. So of course, you know, we talk a lot about that radio part, but as the transport network, you need to be the first to serve. Like in 5G, you need to be the first to provide the connectivity for the radio, or the facing for the radio, you know, for the 5G. So we need to be there. The fiberization comes into the play. You need to have the platform. So transport seems to be a bit of a legacy in that sense, but there is a lot of development in it as well that enables the services on top. So when you talk about private networks, when you talk about slicing, you know, prioritization, those mechanisms are mainly driven in transport.
And Rudolf, perhaps, I know we mentioned this previously, that the title of the session was about 5G, but of course the reality, as Aysenur just said, is about the combination of fixed and mobile. So does it in a way make are you bringing the transport networks together for both? They were separate, my understanding was.
Yeah, so at Swisscom we first had two different networks. We're now consolidating that into one network. And one key step that we're making is, I have to go a little bit into detail about something else, is we introduced a network that interconnects all the platforms at Swisscom. And there we already did experience with how powerful an API is, a network API is. And so when we decided to harmonize the transport infrastructure, we said, well, why not use this network API to manage and interface with the whole network? And this is actually what we're now doing. We're standardizing the transport infrastructure according to this layer 3 API that we already have deployed and used in the company. And this is incredibly powerful.
Which is important, and I guess at the end of the day, we talk about the demands coming in, but ultimately controlling that cost and taking the cost out, simplifying, I think, as you said at the very beginning. Sasha, obviously as a vendor, obviously I can't ask you the multi-vendor question, but I'll come back to these two in a second. But as a vendor, how are you seeing the different parts of Nokia coming together to support the transport environment? Is that, we used to call it end-to-end, didn't we? But I guess how is that picture evolving from the Nokia perspective?
In terms of multiple domains, technology domains coming together. So that's an interesting question, right? Because on one hand, for each domain, you want to have best-in-class products and you want to have, you want to do the best job for that particular domain. On the other hand, there are synergies across the domains, whether it's a technology or end-to-end operation flows, end-to-end control and slicing, if you talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a bit of an advantage because as a big company, we actually have strength in multiple all transport domains, really, right? So we can then build on that strength and develop use cases that go across multiple domains. So I'll give you an example, right? So IP and optical use cases for us, when we talk to our customers, very often it's the organizational separation, right? There's one team that does IP, the other team that does optical. But sometimes, and more common in a recent few years, those boundaries are kind of blurring and organizations are coming together. And now customers are saying, hey, can you help us out because we want to see topology across IP or optical layers. We want to start doing coordination across IP and optical layers. We want to start understanding what is happening about path diversity across those two layers and actually make sure that the diverse paths are indeed diverse. So we can help them because we are in a good position to work with that. But again, I want to stress, it's not a technology challenge. Often it's an organizational challenge, and often it's really a human challenge, right?
So come on then. So Rudolf from Swisscom, organization challenges you've had to overcome to drive this transport modernization automation.
Yeah, so the interesting thing is we can build an architecture, but it won't really lead to something tangible if you don't also change the way the teams are working and how the interfaces are cut. So this is one of the challenges that we have, that we also align the organization to the target architecture we would like to have. In IP transport, we're doing a good job at it. So we're step by step, we're making sure that we have the interfaces, we have the right cut. We're quite convinced there. In other areas where the discussion is fully open, maybe to add to the multi-domain discussion, having domains or multi-domains is not a free pass to just do whatever you like. We will share many systems across the domains. And the challenge is, how do you cut an organization to allow enablers, so to reuse the IT in many domains, and at the same time to make sure that these domains are autonomous, so that they can do and develop whatever they want. This is the challenge that we currently have.
And I guess it occurs to me, oh sorry, Aysenur, do you want to comment on
that?
Yeah.
I want to bring a different perspective into this discussion because yes, it's about organizations when a vendor talks to the operator. But I don't think that it is the organization is the problem at the moment. So I want to bring this perspective that it is about technology. So when we talk about IP optical convergence, are we there yet? No. It is, I mean, because the vendors, the way the vendors position it is different than the way we see in the operators. So if the operators has the good use cases of the IP optical convergence, for example, in the orchestrators, if we could see it in a different way, if we could use the capacity planning together in the domains, then it will be very easy to change and reflect this to the organization. But when you look at the orchestration use cases, how many orchestrators are there that show you the convergence platform? They're not, none. So I think this is not, I mean, we talk a lot about skill set, people, organization, but I think it's also about the data-driven platforms that we need to use to reflect back to our organization. So if we had the good reflections back, then it would have been easier for us to move forward, right? In the RFP phase, it's difficult to get in. But if we had the platforms, I think it would have been a lot more easier for us as well to move forward with the organization. That is my personal observation in the sector.
So we'll schedule a demo for you so that.
Because I do like this. We're building up a new hierarchy, aren't we, of technology, data, people, and organization in some variation of orders. But it also occurs to me that, given all the things we've talked about during the day, and where does transport sit in the cadence of investment? What is the horizon you look at for investing in the transport network? Is it because you know, we talk about the mobile market being shorter term than the fixed market. We talk about applications being very short term, and I guess data analytics is very short term. Is there a particular cadence to the investment in the transport network? Sasha, do you have a thought about that?
Well, we definitely see it tied very often, as Aysenur said, to radio upgrade cycles, right? Generations of radio networks, and preparing the transport network for next generation of a radio access, right? That's often
But
driving.
if I may interrupt for a second, but the trouble is, and I think Aysenur, you commented on this about being more customer driven.
Yeah.
The fact is that what we do as customers, consumers, businesses, society on the edge, what we demand of the network, the radio cycle is frankly out of kilter with that now. We see that with 5G, that it's gone beyond what people want. Do we not need to rethink the whole chain effect of the demand coming into the network down to the transport?
Yeah, I think...
That's an unfair question, I know,
yes.
but I was going to ask you anyway.
Sorry, you asked to me or to say?
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let me start now. I think it's where this is the area where we use the AI and modeling, how we scale our network. So I think that is how we scale the radio investments and then the transport investments as well. So for transport, there are two aspects. One is using the data growth modeling into the radio and microwave investments, let's say transmission. So that is one part of the investments for transport, and the second part is depending on your fiber infrastructure, of course. You know, if you have fiber, maybe you do less modeling on microwave, etc. And then how you evolve the transport network for consumer and enterprises, because that is how you enable different services. So, and this is how you monetize the network, and this is why we talk about network as a service, how we monetize it, right? In that way, the transport networks needs to combine. So fixed mobile is one way of convergence. Different areas of the transport convergence is another way, like we do with fusion architecture. So this is having a simplified, unified network where you can enable different services towards the customer, right? So I think there are lots of areas, of course, to talk about. When coming back to your question of the customers, I think we use customer data to learn from them, and then we use these modelings to create back new services towards them.
Okay.
I can add maybe also another perspective, which might be interesting. So my colleague enterprise architect, I made the joke because when he said, let's build a new network. So, but it's like 3 years ago where you said let's build a new network and nothing is going to change. And before we built that network, it was 7 years. And so what we're seeing is that the life cycle of building new networks is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we need to be much more efficient in how we roll out the network, how we replace things, how we upgrade the networks. And I'm already waiting for him to tell me in 2 years I'm going to build a new network. That's one aspect. And another aspect is that we have many business segments that had the flexibility or the ability to just introduce network elements as they wished. And that leads to many different types of network elements and many different types of life cycles in the same infrastructure, which is very complex to manage. So this is where we want to get away from. We want to have one network with one life cycle, and anything business specific or the segment specific is done in software. This is our current way of moving forward.
Good.
But if I may just couple of comments. So one thing that I think has changed in the last little while, to your point about monitoring the capacity utilization and planning better, etc. Tooling is available like today that hasn't been available 10 years ago to accurately monitor and proactively predict evolution of the capacity trends on any given link in any given part of the network, right? So that's one change that can help us do a better job at evolving the planning of the network evolutions. But the other part is, to what Rudolf was saying, is yes, there is a kind of heterogeneous networks happening, but again, the technologies are better today to deal with that than they were 15 years ago, right? Managing SNMP or CLI-based devices is different than providing a unified view across a heterogeneous network when you do have netconf, young modeling, et cetera, et cetera. So there is also progress there, and even some standardization around object models, et cetera, that help us as vendors deal with those complexities and provide a little bit better way of handling those kinds of networks.
Thank you. And so let's talk a bit about vendors for Aysenur and Rudolf. So we talk about the multi-vendor environment, about disaggregating different parts of the network, opening it up, being a more open, software-centric network activity. Does bringing more vendors into the mix make it easier or make it more difficult?
Depends to whom you're talking, I think.
You.
So if we would have purchasing, they would love to have many vendors in the game.
Yeah.
If you talk about operations, of course, they would only have one. We probably need to support a mix, and also across domains, we will always have various vendors in the game. That's pretty clear.
Yeah. Aysenur, do you have a thought?
I think the evolution in the core is far than transport. Today, we still rely a lot on the hardware. I mean, like the segregation in the access we've done is I think, just a part of it. But when you look at the big IP and optical vendors, there's a lot of hardware dependency still. So I see that dependency, and this is why I think automation is important. How we implement the OSS transformation in the tool landscape to get less dependent on the on some of the platforms. You see, I think this is the disaggregation in that area that we need to have, because for I mean, in transport I see, okay, there's some vendors still in the core domain, in the IP core domain for disaggregation, but still a lot of hardware. So I think the segregation will happen, like I said, in the horizontal domain. In optical, we will see a bit of maybe IP in small scale.
So of course, when we step back and look at the industry as a whole, and we see the stratification where more and more neutral hosts coming in, more and more networks, tower companies splitting out. So this will be interesting to see how this pans out. But Sasha, if I may to you, you don't just deal with the telco service providers, you also look at the hyperscalers.
Yeah.
I mean, how are they dealing with this transport issue on a very different?
Well, for them, I guess, when they build their own networks, it's a slightly different proposition, because it's building the network for their own workloads and for themselves. So it's a little bit different challenges than service providers have. But when you talk about automation, their approach is definitely different than traditionally has been in our industry, which is automate from start, right? And everything is automated. By definition, all the operations are automated from the beginning, right? So that's a different approach, and I think that's where we all aspire to get to eventually.
So in some of the blurb notes for the session, one of the comments, and I guess we're always looking at this, is obviously we'd love to be generating extra revenue and new revenue, and we'll deal with that in different sessions. But in terms of lowering the cost of operations of the transport network, what's your stretch goal? How much can we reduce that cost of operations? Or given the demands being placed on you as a transport network, you're just going to keep that budget ticking over?
So can I start with that? Because the reason is we actually asked the same question, right? We've been at automation for a while now, right? But we asked the question a few years ago, okay, so can we quantify this thing, right? How much can you save? So we actually worked with Analysis Mason, and they went and talked to a whole bunch of customers and looked at the numbers. And there's interesting things that they came back with. One is the savings are actually significant. Talking about average of 65% depending on the area of automation use cases. But the interesting thing for me was, we often as an industry, when we talk about automation, we first go, oh, let's talk about automation of provisioning of services or devices, etc. But what they found is that operational lifecycle management of the network and automating that yielded like upwards of 80% of savings. Or assurance of the network huge savings, again, in the range of 70+%. So there are different aspects of automation that can yield very significant operational and cost savings across the board, right? So I don't think anybody needs to be convinced anymore that there are benefits to automation. It's,
do you get to save that money and spend it on something else, or does that just, the CFO wants to take that away from you?
well, I would hope it's the former one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's enough, as you said, there's enough work for a lot of people, right?
Well, I
So
guess it's new demand coming in, as we talked about earlier, balanced against. So,
It's
sorry,
like burning money, in this CapEx and OpEx. I think it's from the operator perspective, there's a lot of CapEx and OpEx investments, and now lately with energy, there's a lot of different use cases that we need to look at. Even looking at some of the platforms we build as resilient, we need to see how to shut them off now, today, to save some energy. So the world is really changing, and providing CapEx and OpEx efficiency is the key, right? Cost per gigabyte is the, how efficient you operate is the key. And I think it changes from use case to use case, from operator to operator. But obviously there are so many different cases that we can make use of, right?
Sure.
And I see in general, like you start minimum 20–30%, going up to 50%, in some cases 60% of efficiencies.
So Sasha, in what proportion of the RFPs you reply to is cost saving the most important element? If ever there was a loaded question there.
Good question.
yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't frame it that way. I think automation is implied, but not as necessarily cost saving being the something that you measure, right? We have had cases where our customers have measured after the fact, so previous modus operandi, and then they deploy automated use case, and then they measure, and they share it with us to say, hey, look, this is how much we've saved. So we had one study published by TPGT that they actually said they wanted to achieve cost savings, but they didn't quantify it. So then after they deployed the first phase, they published it, and it was, again, in 88% range or something like this. Huge savings. But we don't see it in RFPs as a specific objective in terms of cost savings. It's more about automating provisioning, automating lifecycle management, and things like that.
There's always a hidden.
Oh, come on, fight over it.
There's always a hidden.
I'm sure
number,
I'm sure it is, right?
Vendors.
Yeah.
I mean, from our perspective, if you look at the total cost of what, for example, a transport network is, most of the cost goes into the hardware, goes into the power, goes into the locations, and then maybe 30% or so is the actual IT and personnel costs. So at least with us, that's what we calculated. Of course, we want to reduce the OpEx there, that's clear. But the primary case is to increase resilience, stability. This is our primary goal, why we do this kind of things. We want to have less human errors in the networks, and we do that by introducing CI/CD, by doing this production, this factory-like implementation. That's our goal. On the other hand, no one is going to accept that, you're going to make the network more stable. How are you going to prove that? And if you want to make a business case for that, you get into fantasy things, like I avoid a major incident. This major incident would have cost me 10 million news coverage, these kind of things. We don't do that. We said, no, we're not going to that direction. But we do motivate what we do with actual CapEx, OpEx savings, and there is significant savings there.
Great. Francis, I do apologize, we're almost at the top of the hour. Were there any quick questions from the audience? I did say we'd come to the audience, but as you've gathered, they like talking quite a lot about this stuff. Or do you all need a drink? Any signs?
No questions, no.
No, of course not. Well, listen, just a quick final comment. So why are you so optimistic about the future of the transport? Sasha, let's start with you.
Well, I'm optimistic because of automation. I actually think that with automation and topics that were discussed earlier, network as a service, opening up the consumption of a network in many different ways. Yeah. And through automation, we can actually get more out of the network in a way, right? And that's what I'm very excited about.
And Rudolf and Aysenur, do you feel part of the bigger telco family now? It's not just transport, you're influenced by other things going on? Is that the optimistic scenario?
Of course, we are the cause of the, in the core of the network, and without the transport, there is no communication, right?
True.
That is, we link it, we link the radio stations.
And Rudolf, positive?
Yeah, so what we're now doing in IP transport is really cool. So we're making an API over a transport network. This is
Who'd have thought we'd finish with transport being cool? How about that for a
well,
great way
I
to
think
finish?
it is.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Rudolf. Thank you, Aysenur. Thank you for joining us. And enjoy the rest of your evening. However.
Thank you to Chris and the panel. I'd just like to encourage, I think, a great session today. Next door, almost immediately, we'll be having the prizes, I guess, for the awards going on next door. I encourage you to go next door and enjoy the atmosphere, as it were. It's almost Oscars night. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Francis.
Okay, thank you.